What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and we are in a situation where we now have some more news regarding Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen, the new Dragonlance D&D book that we know is coming out in December, although if you pre-order it through D&D Beyond, you can get it early in November. They actually gave us a preview of the Lunar Sorcerer. So if you recall, this was received in an Unearthed Arcana where we'd gotten a bunch of the background feats and things, and kind of where we first got our preview as to what feats are going to actually look like going forward with this whole. I guess we did technically get it in Strixhaven, but I feel like, I don't know, I always just forget that one. But where you get the feats at first level, that whole kind of a thing. But yeah, they gave us basically 6 hours ago, as of me recording this, a preview of the Lunar Sorcerer. And for those of you who recall, I did videos on it when it came out. It was pretty powerful in that it gave you a ton of versatility as a sorcerer. Like 15 spells, basically at level 1 that you'll get over the course of leveling as a sorcerer. And it seems, shockingly, that made its way through into the final version. So if you, I guess before I do that, hey, if you see this number, it's continued to grow, and that's thanks to all of you being awesome. If you like what I do here, all the variety of different content and things, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's a simple click for you. It does a lot for me. So if we head over to D&D Beyond, it was on the main page here. You'll see Lunar Sorcery preview here. So I click that, and let's take a look. So it says, let's see, get early access. We talked about that. So when you choose the subclass at first level, you can channel your magic through the power of the moon's phases, full moon, new moon, and crescent moon, unlocking different abilities. I'm assuming this is going to probably be the finalized art that we receive for it in the book. So what do you get? Lunar embodiment at first level. As a lunar sorcery sorcerer, you'll earn a whopping 15 additional spells as you level. Additionally, whenever you finish a long rest, you'll choose whether you're channeling the power of the full moon, new moon, or crescent moon. When you choose a phase, you can cast the associated spells once per day without expending a spell slot. You can cast the associated first level spell once per day. Okay. You know what? Let's pull up the one from Wizards of the Coast and see, because we'll have to do a little bit of a comparison. So let's get to our sorcerer here. Did I miss it? I guess I did. Okay. Did I click the wrong one? No, here it is. All right. So here's the 15 spells that we received originally. You'll see again, full, new, and crescent. And basically, it does say you learn these spells, and they basically are added to your spell list and count as your number of sorcerer spells that, or don't count against the number of sorcerer spells that you have. So potentially, as it stands currently, we don't know what one D&D is going to hold for the sorcerer going forward. But the Lunar Sorcerer is, in theory, the most versatile in that you have these extra 15 spells added to your spell list on top of the base ones that you choose and learn to know as a sorcerer. So originally it said when you finish a long rest, you can choose what lunar phase manifests its power through your full magic. When in the chosen phase, spells of the associated lunar table can be cast once without expending a spell slot. So if I read what they're suggesting here, they kept the majority of this. You'll still get the 15 spells known, and there was a wide variety of usefulness, things that were on and not contained. Some on, some not on the Lunar Sorcerer, or the base Sorcerer spell list. And it was originally that you would pick sort of a manifestation each day, and then you could cast each one of those spells for free without expending a spell slot. So again, for example, if we chose Full Moon, and we were at least 9th level, once a day we could cast Fairy Fire, Moonbeam, Death Ward, Freedom of Movement, and Mass Cure Wounds, each one of those individually for free without expending a spell slot. Seems like currently it has been adjusted to you can cast the associated first level spell once without expending a spell slot. I understand the change because this was, as it was written, quite powerful. But why only? It's just a weird design mechanic. You can cast the first level spell without expending a spell slot. It just seems odd and off to me. But either way, the fact that you get to keep the 15 spells is pretty great. I also wouldn't be surprised if some of these end up changing out And don't worry, when it does release, and I will be pre-ordering it, so I'll have access to it early, we'll be able to go through and do a quick comparison. And that was the other thing you got here was Moonfire. You learn the Sacred Flame spell, which doesn't count against the number of cantrips that you know. And when you cast the spell, you can target one creature as normal or target two creatures that are within 5 feet of one another. So Sacred Flame is a 60-foot range. Normally, you can only hit one target. This effectively doubles that by allowing you to target two as long as they're nearby. Similar in a vein to kind of to like an Acid Splash, but now we're doing radiant damage. It does look like we do still retain Moonfire. You learn the Sacred Flame cantrip and can choose to cast it at 2 targets within 5 feet of each other, instead of only casting the spell on one target. In certain circumstances, this could constitute a free use of Twin Spell. Even better, when compared to Acid Splash, a similar spell with similar mechanics, this special casting of Sacred Flame does more damage. So there's my example. Okay. Lunar Boons, originally at 6th level, we had... basically, you learn something tied to the specific school of magic. Each lunar phase is associated with one of the following. Full moon was abjuration and conjuration. New moon was evocation and necromancy. Crescent moon was divination and transmutation. Whenever you use your meta magic from your base sorcerer feature on a spell associated, on a spell from the lunar spells table, that 15 spells that we had originally, or a school of magic associated with the lunar phase you are in, you can reduce the sorcery point spent by 1 to a minimum of 0. You can reduce the sorcery points spent for your meta magic a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. So if you realize that it does say the minimum is 0, that means you can potentially, depending on what you're using, cast those use your meta magic features essentially for free, reducing something that may have a meta magic cost of 1 sorcery point to 0, allowing you to do that feature completely free. Again, the only limitation being proficiency bonus times per long rest. Let's see if we maintain that as we move forward. It says each lunar embodiment becomes associated with 2 schools of magic. Whenever you use a meta magic on a spell from a school of magic associated with your current lunar embodiment, you can reduce the sorcery points spent by 1. You can do this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. This even works on meta magic options that only cost 1 sorcery point. At 5th level, there's 3 free uses of Distance Spell, cast Blindness Deafness from 60 feet away, or Subtle Spell, try counterspelling this. Well, they're flat out just telling you up front, you can use it to get a freebie counterspell via Subtle Spell. So it says when you use a meta magic on a spell from your school of magic associated with your lunar. Okay, so I think the tweak is previously it used to be whatever you were associated with, the 5 spells for your particular manifestation, or the 2 schools, and again, potentially these remain the same. It looks like it has shifted to now, and I guess it's kind of less clunky to just be whatever the 2 schools you're associated with. Which is fine. I think that makes sense. We also got at 6th level, Waxing and Waning originally was as a bonus action. You can spend a sorcery point to change your lunar phase to something else. Again, potentially allowing you to get access to different spells. The big shift was originally, the way it was written is in theory, you could, how it originally was determined, you could cast each one of those spells for free. Then in theory, you could switch your manifestation as a bonus action and then have access to a whole new set of spells to cast. Let's see how that changed. It says, now you can shift your lunar embodiment phase on a whim. For the cost of a bonus action and a sorcery point, you can enter a new lunar embodiment phase. In addition, you can cast 1 first-level spell from each lunar phase once per day without expending a spell slot, provided you are in the same lunar phase as the spell. This new feature makes you highly adaptable as it allows you to quickly switch your phases when presented with new challenges. Before entering a battle, you might switch into the full moon phase to prioritize defensive magic, but if you want to use meta magic on an evocation spell at a discounted rate, you can quickly swap to the new moon phase and blast away. So if we were to go and look, it does appear that new moon still retains necromancy and evocation, or at least we know it retains rather evocation based on that. It also says that full moon was tied to defensive magic, so that does seem to make sense that abjuration would be there. So it does appear that sort of our initial interpretation of how it was in the original one, swapping phases, does still give you access to that freebie once a long rest spell, which is still really powerful. I mean, again, them making it just be the first level spell limitation makes a little more sense when you look at this ability. So I get it. And it is still, again, it's still gearing up to be one of, if not the most powerful sorcerer that we've had so far. The folks who cry constantly of power creep, you're right. I think this is very clearly a power crept subclass. But again, we don't know what 1D&D will hold in store for us. So maybe the general sorcerer will just be that much more powerful. So this will be kind of maybe a bridge the gap kind of a thing where this gets us closer to what they want to have with 1D&D. Or if 1D&D base sorcerer is more powerful and you can somehow also use this subclass, you might just break the game. I don't know. All right, originally at 14, we got Lunar Empowerment. The power of a lunar phase saturates your being. Whenever you choose a lunar phase to affect your magic, you also gain the following benefits associated with said phase. If you choose full moon, you shed bright light in a 10-foot radius and dim light in another 10 feet. In addition, you and creatures of your choice have advantage on saving throws, just flat out, while contained in that 10-foot radius. So essentially a very powerful, almost paladin level aura as it stands. If they're within 10 feet of you, they just have advantage on all saving throws, which is pretty solid. New Moon is advantage on stealth checks. In addition, if you are in dim light or darkness, attack rolls have disadvantage against you. Also a phenomenal one, right? Just the advantage on stealth checks, just period. Great for you. That's very useful. And then while you are in dim light or darkness, which can be in a lot of situations depending on where you put yourself in, attack rolls have disadvantage against you. That's huge. That's a very powerful defensive buff. You are essentially giving yourself the benefits of a Cloak of Displacement without having to use the magic item. And then Crescent Moon is resistance to necrotic and radiant damage. Again, depending on that one may be less useful for you if you happen to play something like, say, an Azamar where you already have those. I would just say consider the race you're picking if this is going to be something you're looking to use specifically. But now I'm also cooking up in my head a really interesting level of 14 sorcerer, 6 paladin multi-class, so that you could possibly have, I don't know, be something like a Oath of the Ancients paladin level, the level to level 6, and then a 14 level Lunar Sorcerer. And then if you're in the full moon mode, basically you'd provide to everybody that's within that certain radius of you, you'd be able to provide all those sorts of benefits. Although I'm realizing that the aura may come online at 7th level, so that may be on me. Actually, you know what? We're just going to go check because I don't want to speak out of turn. So, yes, I think I am speaking out of turn. My mistake. I think it would have to be... they might have done that on purpose, honestly. Yeah, it's at 7th level. Because I was going to say, it'd be really cool if you could do Lunar Empowerment and also have that so you could provide resistance to damage from spells and also advantage on saving throws. But either way, a 6th level Paladin would still get you Charisma modifier to all of your saving throws to anybody that's within 10 feet of you, and you'd also be providing advantage on those saving throws. You could potentially make an extremely powerful defensive option by choosing the Lunar Sorcerer. I also am thinking this may be something like almost not necessarily a staple, but like this is a really solid powerhouse to add to any party. Let's see if Lunar Empowerment even maintained the same power level. Let's say you further embody your lunar phase, bolster allied skill checks, improve your own ability to sneak and avoid attacks while in darkness, or boost your innate defensive depending on the lunar phase you're in. With waxing and waning, you can shift your lunar phases with ease, allowing you to choose that. Yeah, that is also something to consider, right? The 6th level ability does allow you to shift your phase as a bonus action, so you can really choose to cater to whatever thing you need at the moment. So it does seem like some things shifted. It does say bolster allied skill checks. So perhaps maybe this ability here has been shifted to be skill checks, or maybe the new moon has boosted something in that way. Improve your own ability to sneak. So perhaps new moon does remain the same. And then lastly, it says, or boost your innate defenses. So full moon sounds like the one that's boost your innate defenses. Perhaps that remained the same. And then I'm wondering if they swapped crescent moon from just flat out resistance to damage to this allied skill checks. I don't know. It sounds like the general theme of it has remained the same. So let's go ahead and check our last ability here, which was a Lunar Phenomenon, our 18th level ability. It says, as a bonus action, you can tap into a special power of the lunar phase you are currently in. Alternatively, as part of the bonus action you take to change your lunar phase using waxing and waning, you can immediately use this power. So normally, if you're in the phase, you can choose to use a bonus action to activate it, or if you choose to shift, you can then activate it as part of that bonus action. For full moon, you radiate intense moonlight. Each creature of your choice within 30 feet of you makes a con save against your spell save DC or be blinded until the end of its next turn. In addition, one creature of your choice in that 30-foot radius regains 3d8 hit points. New moon, let's see. Each creature of your choice within 30 feet must make a dex save against your spell save DC or take 3d10 necrotic damage and have its speed reduced to 0 until the end of its next turn. In addition, you become invisible until the end of your next turn until you make an attack or cast a spell. So let's just see. Let's just check. So it's a Constitution saving throw or be blinded. So there is, if there's nothing that happens, so if they succeed, they're just not blinded. You still get the free heal though, which is nice. For this one here, dexterity saving throw or take necrotic damage, have their speed reduced. So it seems if there's not half damage on a success, but you do also still become invisible, which I kind of like this, that it has like, you know, kind of an active ability, but then something passive happens too. The healing, the invisibility. And then Crescent Moon, you slip through light and darkness. You can magically teleport to an unoccupied space you can see within 60 feet. In addition, you also gain resistance to all damage until the start of your next turn. Once you use this as bonus action, you can't do it until you finish a long rest unless you spend 5 sorcery points to do it again. As a bonus action or as part of the bonus action used to switch your embodiments, you can unleash the power of your current phase. In full moon phase, you burst with light, blinding nearby allies and healing an enemy, or blinding nearby enemies rather and healing an ally. That seems to be the same. In new moon, you emanate gloom, reducing enemies' speed and becoming temporarily invisible. So it seems like they may have removed the damage aspect of that and just reduced the enemy speed and the invisibility. And during crescent moon, you can teleport yourself and now one other creature of your choice and grant yourselves resistance to all damage until the start of your next turn. And you don't have to limit yourself to just choosing one of these per day. You can use each of the phases once per long rest. Wow, that's a pretty solid improvement. So previously, was it always once? Once you use a phases bonus action. Okay, so it was always that way. I just misread it. But it does seem that they did retain this. So once per long rest, you can use it. You can still expend 5 sorcery points to use it again, which I really like when they do this. I've liked a lot of these abilities where it's like it's a once per long rest ability unless you want to expend something like a high level spell slot if you're a half caster, sorcery points, key points, whatever, to get the ability to use it back. So from what I can tell, it looks as though the full moon ability pretty much seems to be, again, we don't know the entirety of it. It seems the full moon ability is more or less unchecked. It looks like the new moon ability, looks like they possibly removed the necrotic damage, but did still include the reduced speed as well as the invisibility. And Crescent Moon now has the ability to also allow you to bring an ally with you, and said ally also gets the resistance. Let's see, there's a section here compared to other sorcerer subclasses. I'm very curious. It says the Lunar Sorcerer is a highly versatile subclass granting more spells known than even the Aberrant Mind and Clockwork Soul. They grant 11 and 10 known respectively. Need to shroud yourself in darkness, hop into New Moon phase. Heading into battle with the undead, good thing you're in Crescent Moon phase. While picking a lunar phase once per day will work just fine for most low-level characters, you'll be able to shift as a bonus action at 6th level. You'll also notice that the Lunar Sorcerer's features are quite forgiving when it comes to resource drain and action economy. Waxing and waning allows you to change phases with a bonus action and a sorcery point. Lunar Embodiment stacks bonuses onto each phase without the need to expend resources, and Lunar Phenomenon's ability can be triggered when you activate Waxing and Waning. Furthermore, the Lunar Boon feature makes your meta magic cheaper to use for certain schools of magic, and the Moonfire ability effectively allows you to cast Sacred Flame at 2 targets instead of 1. So this doesn't actually give us a comparison. This is just basically telling you it's better in every way. Which I agree, it does seem to be better in every way. If they retain some of the original spells, you did actually get access to things like Mass Cure Wounds, which gives you something like a pretty powerful heal that you can access with your spells here, as well as if you look at these again, assuming these remain the same. Death Ward, this was the funky one where they gave us Death Ward at 3rd level instead of 4th level, so nobody really knew if that was just a typo or not, and they never addressed it. But there's also some very useful abilities here. Dissonant Whispers, Fairy Fire, very useful. Phantom Steed is a fantastic movement spell. I don't know, a lot of really good options there. Let's see what else. Things to keep in mind. Remember, you can access the spells under each lunar embodiment phase regardless of the phase you're currently in. This means you have up to an additional 15 spells you can cast on top of those that your sorcerer learns on their own. However, if you're looking to perform your once daily casting of the first level spell associated with each lunar phase without a spell slot, you'll have to be in the associated phase. Due to the sheer number of options they possess, the Lunar Sorcerer is a subclass for players that love crunching options. If you're a player that likes to focus on multiple things at once, this is the Sorcerer for me, right? I have said in the past that I didn't really love the Sorcerer, and it was primarily due to the limitations in the number of spell slots that you had. So the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer was something that I was seriously considering because of the expanded spell options, the ability to cast with sorcery points, the versatility there. But obviously, in my mind, the Lunar Sorcerer is clearly superior. 4 more spells than the Aberrant Mind, the sort of defensive, offensive, utility capabilities of the different moon phases. And this is also not to mention that if you play a race that provides you access to certain other spells, if you recall, the way new things are working now is if you play a race that provides you with an additional spell, it's usually this spell can be cast once per long rest without expending a spell slot, but then you can also cast it with spell slots that you have. So depending on what you pick, you could pick a race that provides you with a cantrip that you're now able to now use Charisma for, and then possibly 1 to 2 other spells that you can just add to your spell list between those 15 spells from Lunar Phase and potentially 1 to 2 from your character's race. You have a lot of versatility in what you can choose, and that's not even including things like the new backgrounds that provide you a feat at first level. If your DM allows you to use something like the Strixhaven magic, you could possibly get a bunch of access to a whole slew of other spells that way as well. And then there's also going to be the new feats tied to the backgrounds that are just contained within this book itself. So you may be able to have more spells than ever before as a sorcerer, which then, in my mind, makes it that much more appealing to me, as I am somebody who likes to have the ability to crunch and choose options. That's why Paladin is my favorite class, because it gives me a little bit of both. I've got spell casting, I've got utility and healing, I've got damage, I've got, boosts for my allies via auras. I very much enjoy that because I can choose whatever fits. The fact that Paladin and things like Cleric also change out their spells on a long rest and they're prepared casting rather than known allows me to cater things to fit the situation. The Lunar Sorcerer basically seems to give me all of that and then some. So I'm a fan for sure. And then it says the Lunar Sorcery subclass champions flexibility and versatility, allowing you to easily shift from one to the other. The whole subclass has strong celestial and twilight themes, such as the Lunar Phase. As the Dragonlance setting approaches, you'll need a sorcerer that can survive the impending War of the Lance. How will you use the subclass's adaptability to navigate the challenges you'll face? So there you go. There has been more released in the terms of Dragonlance. A lot of sort of backstory stuff on the Knights of Salamnia and the Mages of High Sorcery. But again, we know that those will be the new backgrounds included, and there will be associated feats. So I'm very excited. Honestly, more than I thought I would be about the Dragonlance book. There was the initial hype around Dragonlance because everybody's like, oh man, we're finally getting Dragonlance in 5e. And then there was the real severe dip in faith and hype when Spelljammer released, as people were not too happy about what was included or what wasn't included in that book. So it kind of made people a little worried that, like, well, if this is what they did to Spelljammer, what are they going to do to Dragonlance? And if they touch any other classic campaign settings. But the fact that they're doing kind of what I've always seen them do, and I enjoy this ultimately, is they're hedging their bets in that, hey, this is an adventure, sort of not really a campaign setting, or maybe a little bit, but it's an adventure. But hey, we're going to include some character options because as people who run the business, they know that the player base is significantly larger than the DM base. So it makes more sense for us to include more player options. And this is something that I'll also throw out there to anybody who does third-party content creation or the DM's Guild or what have you. Now, I know it may not necessarily fit into the product that you're doing, but if you can offer some sort of something that helps the player, whether it's a subclass, a new race, a background, magic items, what have you, you'll get more people to pick up your product because it applies to the player base, not just DMs. So I would imagine the amount of people that obviously went out and bought something like Tasha's Cauldron of Everything was significantly larger than the folks who bought Tyranny of Dragons, right? Or Out of the Abyss. But if you have some sort of blend, like a Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica or a Mythic Odysseys of Theros, that's a campaign setting, it has an adventure in it, but it also has a ton of player options. You're going to get a lot more people to want to jump on to pick that up than you are if it was just an adventure. And that seems to be what they're doing here by including new feats, new backgrounds, as well as the Lunar Sorcerer subclass. We probably are also going to get the Kender race as well, I would imagine, so we'll get at least one new race. And that's kind of a simple way that they can do a little bit, right? We give you one subclass, we give you one race, we give you two backgrounds and a handful of feats. And then we can focus the rest of the book on other things. I think that does a lot more to get people to pick this up. But it can backfire because it can kind of go in the way of what I mentioned is Guildmaster's Guide, or no, Vedricton's Guide to Ravenloft. I didn't think the actual material in the back half of it was super useful, but the player materials and things were were interesting. We had the new concept of the legacies, we had the concept of the dark gifts, we had two subclasses in there and a handful of different backgrounds. So we could kind of use that, and I think that that worked out well, but I think the kind of content around the domains themselves was kind of weak. A little bit on horror adventuring, and then like a small bestiary was okay, but I don't know. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. This video ran a little bit longer, but it's late at night. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, so give me a break. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.